So, what is LD debate? Lincoln Douglas debate is a 1v1 philosophical policy debate centered around a topic that changes once every 2 months. Lincoln Douglas debate is based off of the debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas on the morality of slavery in the antebellum South. So, high school Lincoln Douglas debate is very similar to those debates since it is also centered around ethics or the morality of one's actions. So the standard Lincoln Douglas debate is about one person's case and the main points being tied into a philosophy or a way about thinking of life. The debate is about deciding whose philosophy or way of thinking about life is better suited for the current topic or the current debate. So the winner of the debate boils down to who can better prove their own philosophy or way about thinking of life better, which is bolstered by contentions, which is a claim, warrant, or impact. It's basically one-person public forum that takes into account ethics and morality when debating. The affirmative constructive. The affirmative constructive is the opening speech of the debate, and it is the speech that sets all of the affirmative's initial points on the board. It allows for the affirmative debater to set the debate and guide where the debate is going to. For example, if I read a case in the affirmative constructive that talks about minority bashings, then the entire debate will be about minority bashings. So the affirmative constructive will dictate what your opponent has to talk about in the debate. So how I write my cases, specifically the affirmative constructive, is in reverse. I would write my contentions or main points about the debate, then I would structure them into a philosophy or way of thinking about life. This is called a value or value criterion. In the affirmative constructive, you must have offense or main points that bolster your case, and you must tie those main points into a value or value criterion, which is basically a way of thinking about life, a philosophy. For example, take the minority bashings case. A contention or main point would be it is bad to disenfranchise Latinos or blacks. Then you would structure that underneath a value, which is a philosophy. Take morality, for example. It's a very simple philosophy that works for almost any point. So morality is basically what is good and what is bad. Most Lincoln Douglas debaters will use morality as a framework because it is so easy to use. So what is good and what is bad? So, for example, the minorities case would relate to that because it is bad to disenfranchise minorities. Thus, it is moral to minimize that. So, basically, the affirmative constructive is going to be a value at the top, which is basically a philosophy, then your main points at the bottom. Cross-examination or cross-ex. Cross-ex is a 3-minute time period that allows you to ask your opponent any questions about their case. This can be used to ask questions to help clarify things you don't understand about their case or you simply didn't pick up during the affirmative constructive. But cross-ex can be used to your advantage by asking your opponent cases that poke holes in their case. The unofficial goal of cross-examination is to make your opponent say the words, "I don't know." When you make them say, "I don't know," you come across as the superior debater, and they come across as unknowledgeable and uncredible. So, on summation, just make them say, "I don't know," and you can win the round simply off cross-examination. A lot of lay judges will vote off cross-ex. The first negative rebuttal is very similar to the first affirmative constructive, meaning that both of them have to do with setting the groundwork. So for the negative rebuttal, what you're going to have to do is first lay out what you want to talk about. As the negative debater, you have the option to just put out a negative position and build off of that. But the thing that differs from the first affirmative constructive and the first negative rebuttal is that not only in the negative rebuttal you have to set the framework and set the groundwork, you also have to refute the affirmative constructive. So when setting the framework for the negative rebuttal, you still have to have a standard value criterion, and main points. That's the same as the affirmative constructive. Now the difference is that you have to attack the affirmative constructive. So you would first attack their points or their values, depending on the order they presented it. It's also the way you want to attack it. But if you don't attack any part of their case, any part of their case left over or unresponded to will go across the flow. And that's a term that means unresponded to, and you basically agree with it. And if you have a lot of those unresponded to arguments, you'll lose the round immediately. They'll say the phrase, "My opponent dropped the evidence." So dropping evidence basically means not talking about it in this particular speech. So make sure you address your opponent's evidence and make sure you build your own case. That's all the negative rebuttal is. The first affirmative rebuttal is probably the hardest speech in the entire debate. You have a lot of stuff to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. You only have 4 minutes to do two things. One, defend your case, and two, refute your opponent's case. And it sounds very simple, but it's very hard to do in 4 minutes. So the reason why this is very hard is because the negative debater in the previous speech is going to have 7 minutes. So you have to counter 7 minutes of attacks on your case in 4 minutes. And a really effective way of doing this is by signposting. Signposting is when you use numbers to organize your thoughts. So it would be like, 1, my opponent's case fails to prove the long-term effects. 2, my opponent's case does not provide sufficient evidence to vote off of. It's using numbers to illustrate the main points. So once you defend off your opponent's attacks on your case, you're going to have to refute theirs. So it's refuting and defending your case in 4 minutes. The second neg rebuttal is by far my favorite speech. You can do a lot of stuff and you have a lot of time to do it. There's 3 main things you should do in this speech. 1, defend. Defend your own case and position. If you do this, you can win the debate right off that because you will have the more complete case. So any arguments your opponent makes, make sure you address them and just explain to the judge why those arguments don't matter. The second thing you should do is attack your opponent's case. You can't read any new evidence that hasn't been read previously, so you would have to use analytics or evidence already read. So if you attack your opponent's case, you should do it mostly in this case, in this speech, because you're going to have the most time to do it, and it's the last thing in the judge's mind. And the third thing is called crystallization. Crystallization is basically a summary of the debate, a summarization of the attack on your opponent's case and the defense of your case. So the tagline you should use when crystallizing is, "Judge, I clearly won the round because blank, blank, blank." And those blanks should be the flaws in their case and how they can't meet the value or resolution and how your case does a better job of doing so. So 3 parts in this case: defend, attack, and crystallize. the second affirmative rebuttal is kind of the least important speech, meaning that you can't make new arguments and you can't read any new evidence. So you can still respond to your opponent's case, but they can't be new responses. So you're not going to be able to make all the arguments you want to, but merely you're going to be repeating the arguments you've already made. And this is the reason why I don't really like it. There's only one thing you can really do, and that's crystallize. So it's going to be a 3-minute speech on why you won the debate. And the tagline again is, Judge, I clearly won this debate because blank, blank, blank. And those blanks should be because my opponent hasn't met the burden of proof or any arguments you made, and then tie it back into your case. So one of the blanks should be about how your case is good, and another blank should be about how your opponent's case is bad. No new evidence, no new arguments, just a quick summary. Do's and don'ts. I'm going to first start off with the don'ts. First don't is don't get scared about LD. It sounds really scary and really complicated, but I promise it's really not. LD is one of the most rewarding events, and it's a lot of fun. Second is don't contradict yourself. It sounds really easy, but a lot of people, when they get up there and speak, they're going to find loopholes in their own case, and if you contradict yourself, you're going to lose the round. Flat out, judges hate it. It makes you look really bad, and just watch out for it. Because you may do it and may not even realize you're doing it. Third don't is don't pack up at the end of the speech, because there's going to be a time when your opponent's going to pack up during your final speech, and it looks really bad when you're doing it also. So judges hate it, opponents don't like it. It's just rude and pretty disrespectful. Fourth thing is do not talk or go on your phone when your opponent is speaking. Judges hate this the most. It is the biggest pet peeve of a lot of people, and it is probably one of the rudest things you can do in a round. Turn your phones off unless you're using it for timing, and do not talk. I had a round like this, and they completely dropped the opponent. Yeah, the judge actually scolded my opponent who talked when I was talking, and it wasn't pretty. So just don't talk and stay off your phones. Now, do's, what you should do. First thing, probably one of the most important things is to prepare pre-made blocks. So blocks are basically written arguments with evidence that disprove one of your opponent's arguments. So once you start debating the topic a lot more, you're going to see trends like common arguments. And when you see those common arguments, you can make these blocks, which are going to help you out. You just read them in the rebuttals, and it'll make life a lot easier. Second is reread your case before you go into a round. It'll help with your fluency. It'll make you sound a lot better. It may not help you win the round, but it'll give you a lot of speaker points. So if you want good speaker points, reread your cases, just rehearse in general. Third thing is write pre-made questions for cross-ex. When you do this, you sound a lot better, more poised, and a lot more effective in cross-examination in general when you rewrite the questions or pre-make them before the round. Fourth thing, go to practice. We will help you out a lot. You'll get better overall as the debater if you just go to practice and show up. Go through the motions. That helps. Just go to practice. Simple. Also, flow. Flowing is called, it's note-taking, basically. And if you flow your opponent's arguments, it'll make it a lot easier to refute them, because you'll actually have a piece of paper with the arguments, and you could just look and read off that. And signpost. Signposting, again, that's using numbers to organize your thoughts. It helps you as a speaker, and it helps the judge flow the arguments or write down the arguments. And if you do all those things effectively, you will win every round. Lincoln Douglas is a very easy event. If you just stick to the tips, you'll win. Go to practice, prep, and don't be scared.